Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you all to our webinar this evening in honor of Dr. Reiko Tomii, independent scholar, curator, and PoNJA-GenKon co-director. We decided to organize this webinar in conjunction with PoNJA-GenKon in honor of Dr. Tomii's recent award, the 2020 Commissioner for Cultural Affairs Award from the Japanese government. Tonight, she will share her lecture with us, a talk on the subject of a test tube of new art, Naiqua and rental galleries in 1960s Japan. I'd like just to begin first by thanking Dr. Tomii for participating tonight, and also particularly to Miwako Tezuka, as well as Dr. Rika, Hiro, who are participating as well as co-sponsors and discussants for this evening's program. So I'll begin with a brief introduction to Dr. Tomii in case she actually needs one. I don't think that she does. I think most of you know her already. But how about a brief review of her accomplishments? Reiko Tomii is an independent scholar and curator specializing in post-war Japanese art history. Having received a PhD in post-war American art history, she worked at the Center for International Contemporary Art, or SICA, where her first project involved organizing a personal archive of Kusama Yayoi for the inaugural exhibition of that organization. Kusama's first retrospective in the United States in 1989, for which Dr. Tomii collaborated with Alexandra Monroe, brought the Japanese artist back to New York and in retrospect launched Kusama's global ascendance. She really started to appear more often in exhibitions after that point. It was the first of her many collaborations with Dr. Alexandra Monroe. And since 1992, upon the closure of the Center for International Contemporary Art, she has worked as an independent scholar. Beginning with her collaboration with Alexandra Monroe on the book publication in conjunction with the acclaimed exhibition Japanese Art After 1945, Scream Against the Sky, she focused on post-1945 or post-war Japanese art history, which she continues to pursue today. In her independent capacity, Dr. Tomii has worked with numerous institutions and scholars to present her scholarship. Curatorially, she worked with the Queen's Museum in New York for global conceptualism, the Tate Modern in London for Century City, and the Getty Research Institute for art, anti-art, non-art, among many other projects. In academia, early collaborators and supporters of Dr. Tomii included such Japan specialists as Ellen Conant, Professor Thomas Reimer, Anne Sheriff, and Leslie Pincus. Colleagues in art history are too numerous to name, but Jane Farver, Joan Key, Gregory Cholet, and others were instrumental in her long engagement with conceptualism, international contemporaneity, and collectivism. Reiko has enjoyed working with younger and emerging scholars and co-founded PoNJA-GenKon with Dr. Miwako Tezuka, a PhD from right here at Columbia, who was then a graduate student at this institution in 2003. Dr. Tomii's first monograph, Radicalism in the Wilderness, International Contemporaneity and 1960s Art in Japan, was published by MIT Press in 2016. This long-awaited book received the 2017 Robert Motherwell Book Award and was turned into an exhibition called Radicalism in the Wilderness, Japanese Artists in the Global 1960s, in collaboration with Dr. Yukie Takamiya, director of Japan Society Gallery, at that gallery in New York. Her scholarship, especially her methodological exploration of world art history and multiple modernisms, increasingly resonates with scholars working in other non-Western regions. For the past few years prior to the pandemic, she has traveled extensively to lecture in Beijing, Seoul, Singapore, and Australia, I'd love to have your miles, Reiko, in addition to cities across the United States and Europe. I just add to this that for those of us who are not in the contemporary field, Reiko's, or Dr. Tomii's work rather, is fascinating because of the way that she incorporates both archival material as well as oral history into her research. Also, the way that she bridges the divide between academia and museum practice, and also has really been a champion of undersung, underrepresented, and emerging artists, both in Japan and the US as well. So with that, I'd like to turn over the floor to my wonderful colleague, Dr. Miwako Tezuka, who will continue with the program and will introduce Dr. Tomii's lecture. So thank you very much. I will now stop my video and we'll look forward to the comments that will proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. As co-director of PoNJA-GenKon, I would like to first express our gratitude to Professor McElway, the Mary Griggs Burke Center, for this opportunity of collaboration. In fact, this is our very first collaboration, and as such, what a perfect reason to start. And I can only hope that we will be able to continue this as a tradition. I also thank Midori Oka for diligently coordinating the logistics. And I also thank Rika Hiro for taking part in today's program as a discussant. Rika has been a longtime PoNJA member. She's a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Art and Art History at Occidental College in Los Angeles. Her doctoral dissertation looked at the after effects of the atomic bombs in arts and exhibition culture in post-war Japan. She also co-founded the nonprofit art space Art 2102 of Los Angeles and co-curated with Reiko Art, Anti-Art, No-Art, Experimentations in the Public Sphere in Post-War Japan, 1950 to 1970. And she also co-curated Radical Communication, Japanese Video Art, 1968 to 1988 at the Getty Research Institute. She's currently researching on Japanese diaspora artists in mid-20th century Los Angeles. We're very happy to have you here today. Before we start the main part of the program, I wanted to share with you my memory of how PoNJA-GenKon started. It was at the 2003 CAA annual conference on one cold February day in New York. Reiko and I were both there, sitting at the steps of the hotel where the conference was taking place. I was still a graduate student and Reiko already an established scholar. And I don't even know why we were not sitting at a table. Looking at the flood of people moving to various panel discussions and meetings, we just wondered if there was a critical mass of scholars focusing on the study of post-war Japanese art in America, and more broadly in the English-speaking parts of the world. Our PoNJA field was very young at the time, or a very niche subject. We both shook off our feeling of loneliness and decided to start a listserv to call out to people who shared our interest. That was nearly 18 years ago. And as the members grew, we decided that we would remain mainly an online forum without any physical location to tie us down. When we wanted to meet in real life, as we call it now, we trusted our instinct that a right partner organization, university, or museum would appear. And miraculously, we have done a series of 8 conferences working together with major art and academic institutions across the United States. We felt greatly encouraged when Reiko and I saw so many congratulatory messages come through the PoNJA listserv when we announced Reiko's award reception late last year. We were so grateful and able to renew our commitment to continue fostering the field of post-war Japanese art history and to further reach out to and work with a growing number of scholars and also curators. So today's program is designed to do just that, sharing our knowledge, our curiosity, and a forum of discussion in the spirit of collaboration, which Reiko embodies. That is PoNJA's vision. So we will have Reiko's lecture for 50 minutes. It will be followed by a response by discussant Rika Hiro for 10 minutes. Then we will gonna open it up to have a Q&A session with the audience for the remainder of the time. And please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, so that it will be easy for Rika Hiro to field your questions. You can access the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So, Reiko-san, we toast to you for your achievement, kanpai, and I won't start drinking until the very end of the program. Omedetou gozaimasu. Now the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Miwako, and Matthew for kind introduction. I'd like to begin with thanking Matthew and Midori at Columbia for organizing this talk with PoNJA-GenKon, and thanking Miwako for working hard to achieve smooth operation of 2 lectures, this one and the one at the University of Tokyo 1 week ago. Minor correction to what Miwako said is that I did not co-curate the exhibition at Untitled Art with Rika. Unfortunately, I wish I had, but the co-curator was then the curator at the Getty Research Institute, Charles Merriweather. He worked with Rika to organize it. My main contribution was an essay in the catalog. So we are very touchy about what we have done and we have not done. So I just wanted to make a correction.
Thank you, Reiko, for the correction.
Yeah, let me begin. Okay, let's see. Sharing screen. Okay, where is my? Okay. In recent years, the idea of multiple modernisms has been increasingly accepted in world art history. The multiplicity of modernism means that each modernism in a given locale, rooted in its own origins, has developed not just visual, but also other material and intellectual expressions of modernity, particular to that locale. However, this development did not take place in a self-contained space, such as Japan, for example, but was varyingly informed by an intersecting mix of internal and external situations. In other words, the development of modernism in each locale was not underscored by its local situations and transnational, or was underscored by its local situations and transnational or global encounters. Furthermore, these localized manifestations of the modernism are enmeshed in a large transversal matrix of modernism, such as vernacular modernism and decolonial modernism. To recognize this as is the starting point of the examination of multiple modernisms. Simply put, in order to study multiple modernisms, we need to factor both local or micro specificities and global or macro frameworks. This is easier said than done. In deciphering a given modernism, caution must be taken against a facile assumption of universality, because macro is often equated with universal, which is frequently a tacit assumption, a tacit assimilation of Euro-American. This makes each locale potentially fraught with locally situated landmines, if you will. In studying 60s art in Japan, such landmines are not few. Rental gallery or kashi garō is one such landmine in 60s Japan. In order to consider the rental gallery, let us begin with one unfortunate episode of stepping on a landmine. In 1966, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, hereafter abbreviated as MoMA, presented the new Japanese painting and sculpture, an exhibition organized by its two curators, William Lieberman and Dorothy Miller. In the accompanying catalog, Lieberman outlined the art world in Japan based on his field research there. Although the good part of his observation is informative and not inaccurate, he is in retrospect failed to comprehend one locally specific situation. Relevant part in the catalog reads as follows. The average dealer merely sells facilities for one-shot exhibitions, which may last only 6 or 7 days. He makes no effort to represent an individual artist nor to further his career. What Lieberman thought of as the average dealer was not an art dealer at all in the Euro-American sense, that is, the owner of a commercial gallery. But the Japanese average dealer was, as mentioned here, was the owner of a rental gallery. It is not a mistake to say, as we will soon see, that rental galleries sell facilities, their space, for one-shot exhibitions, which may last only 6 or 7 days. This is an accurate description of what rental galleries were and still are. However, he was apparently unaware of the vital role played by rental galleries in the evolution of new art in post-war Japan. If he had, he would have characterized these average dealers in much positive light. With the benefit of hindsight, we can see that the MoMA curator stepped on an art historical landmine. Nonetheless, Lieberman was not entirely to blame. For those who lived through it, the decade of the 60s was still a decade of Eurocentrism, a decade dominated by the single modernism with a capital M. It was not until much later that the notion of the modernism was put through critical interrogation in art history and museums alike. After all, Lieberman was charged to survey the state of new painting and sculpture within the conventional parameters of modernism, which he apparently expected to find through visiting commercial galleries, a methodology tried and tested in New York when he came to Japan for research in December 1964. Unknown to Lieberman, like in New York, Japan saw an exciting development in new art, propelled by radical artists who aspired to transcend the established norms of painting and sculpture. By the time Lieberman visited Japan, these artists had found their ideal habitat in the thriving scene of rental galleries, especially in Tokyo, as well as in extra gallery spaces like urban streets and sometimes remote landscape that I call the wilderness. Conceptually, one's research method, a few factors to consider in assessing Lieberman's Japanese research and exhibition. Conceptually, one's research method would have differed whether one places emphasis on which of the two, new or painting and sculpture, where in painting and sculpture was a significantly older practice than new art in 60s Japan. Institutionally, the exhibition project was not initiated by Lieberman or Miller, but the international program section engaged in cultural exchanges, as have been uncovered by Hiroko Ikegami through her archival research. The two curators of MoMA merely follow the top-down decision despite their unwillingness, although they managed to put together a respectable roster of moderately progressive painters and sculptors. Ultimately, we also have to evaluate Lieberman's individual aesthetic orientation. Notably, in 1965, following his visit in Japan, Lieberman was invited to serve as a juror for that year's Museum of Contemporary Art Nagaoka's award exhibition. The exhibition was a competition among 15 artists, 7 Americans recommended by Lieberman, and 8 Japanese selected by the Japanese jurors. In the final round, Lieberman and Japanese jurors could not agree on who to pick between 2 finalists, Charles Hinman or Takamatsu Jiro, and ended up with no grand prize winner. In the slide, you see Hinman's works in center at the Nagaoka exhibition. Takamatsu presented his shadow series, including a large work shown in the slide too. These are Hinman's canvases dating around 1965 in MoMA's collection and actually acquired in 65 and 66, probably by Lieberman, or Lieberman was instrumental in acquisitions. Hinman was a competent painter of a moderately decorative minimalism. In contrast, Takamatsu's shadow series represented a cutting edge of what would be known as trick art in Japan, with a strongly conceptual approach typical of Takamatsu. It might have been like comparing apples and oranges, but it is not hard to imagine Lieberman firmly stood by with Hinman. In light of his rather conservative or middle-of-the-road taste, it is not surprising if Lieberman wanted to focus on painting and sculpture rather than new art in his first foray into Japanese art. Within these parameters, Lieberman and Miller demonstrated their capable hands. Still, even if Lieberman had become aware of a very local gallery situation, totally unlike that in New York, I wonder if he could have dug deeper to understand its historical context. That is to say, in modern Japan, not just rental galleries, but rental spaces historically played an indispensable role in the formation of modernism. Indeed, without studying a variety of rental spaces, we cannot accurately understand the history of modernism in Japan since the late 19th century. If in the 1960s, the move to the extra gallery spaces by younger artists was new, many of them also heavily relied on the rental galleries. In this sense, their practice was an integral part of the legacy of modernism in Japan. Even for the Japanese themselves, this fact could constitute an unexpected landmine. For example, think of Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum, inaugurated in 1926. It was only nominally a museum. It was constructed expressly to rent its spaces to annual salons hosted by art associations that drove the formation of modernism in tandem with the government-sponsored salon in Japan. The Tokyo Metropolitan was never expected to function like MoMA, a canonical museum in the Western sense that collects, studies, and exhibits work of art. Some may argue, see how behind Japan was. My intention of making this above point is far from it. Rather, I would like to point out that this kind of beratedness discourse embodies nothing but an internalized Eurocentrism on the margin. This is precisely the landmine the Japanese too should be aware, lest they should step on it. My position is this: not just in art, but in many areas of human endeavors, as non-Western areas imported and adapted the Western as the modern. Each area identified local concerns, devised local solutions, and formulate and develop local expressions of modernity. In Japan, one such local solution was the rental gallery. Based on this and other similar historical facts, I'd like to propose to re-examine the foundation of our narrative framework in light of realities of, say, Japan, as well as other areas on the margins. Hypothetically speaking, should there be no Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum as a rental space in Japan? What shape had pre-war modernism and post-war contemporary art taken? And then this brings out all the history of this art. Besides, rental spaces existed in pre-war Japan, not just in the form of museums, but they were also available for a short-term basis inside department stores, as well as small galleries and non-art spaces, including bookstores, art supply stores, and cafes. Rental galleries that proliferated in post-war Japan extended this local tradition. In post-war Japan, the number of rental galleries grew exponentially. According to the gallery directory in the inaugural issue of Bijutsu Nenkan Art Annual, published to supplement the monthly magazine Bijutsu Techo, there were 34 galleries listed for Tokyo in that year. This number demonstrates Tokyo's undeniable centrality in comparison to 12 galleries listed for Osaka, Kyoto, and Nagoya combined. The 34 spaces in Tokyo represented a full spectrum of aesthetic positions, from the more conventional yoga, Western style painting, and Nihonga, Japanese style painting, to the more novel and occasional Gendai Bijutsu, contemporary art. 26 of them were rental galleries that catered to practitioners of yoga and Nihonga, as well as contemporary art. The status of rental gallery was indicated by the yen figures. Oh, okay, so with the green, I indicated the commercial galleries. So the rest is the rental galleries. The status of rental gallery was indicated by the yen figures, mostly in the thousands, given in the column of daily rental fees. In the case of commercial galleries, the fees column would merely state either no rental, 賃貸せず, gallery curated, gallery garō企画による, or occasionally permanent display, 常設. Another important data is the wall length, indicating the mainstay of these gallery exhibitions are painting to hang on the wall. By the 64th edition of Art Annual, the total number of galleries in Tokyo grew to about 100. The banner year of contemporary art, 1964, saw the Yomiuri newspaper company deciding to terminate the Yomiuri Independent Exhibition, the announcement of which in January threw the realm of vanguard art in turmoil. By 1964, as you can see, the gallery data is organized horizontally, much easier to read. The entries are organized according to the area, such as Ginza, Shinjuku, Nihonbashi, with easy-to-read maps added area by area. Of these 100 or so spaces listed, rental galleries numbered 58, 12 of which explicitly stated that they also curated exhibition. On the page on the slide, Sato and Ito galleries are also curating rental galleries. This represents a significant evolution of rental galleries in that some rental spaces began to work with artists more closely to encourage their artistic progress. Customarily, curated exhibition at a rental gallery means that the gallery would invite an artist or a group to have a solo show at its space. The invited artist could determine the show's content just as they would at any other rental galleries, but usually free of charge. It should be noted that curated exhibition in all It should be noted that curated exhibition in all practicalities means no fees involved. diverging from the traditional sense of organized by a curator and such. In this sense, not only does the rental gallery system constitute a landmine in 60s Japan, but its working itself also adds another layer of potential misunderstanding. Toward 1970, the year of the landmark international exhibition Tokyo Biennale 1970, contemporary art was decisively mainstreamed, and both commercial and rental gallery scenes steadily expanded. The number of spaces in Tokyo listed in the 70th edition of Art Annual rose over 160, and just about half of them were rental galleries. Among them, 18 were also curating, including Akiyama, Sato, Runami, and Suruga-dai. With gallery-curated exhibitions, the benefit was mutual. They enhanced the standing of galleries among conventional rental galleries. For example, Sato Gallery was known for the discerning eye of Baba Akira, a painter hired to manage the space and carefully screened artists even for rentals. For artists, to be given a curated exhibition at a rental gallery accrued both financial and critical benefits. Financially, invited artists did not have to pay the 1 week's fees, which would amount to, say, 20,000 yen at Sato or 30,000 yen at Runami in 64. These were considerable sums, especially for young struggling artists, when the starting monthly wage of college graduates working for the national government was 18,000 to 19,000 yen. Critically, short of being picked up by a commercial gallery, an almost impossible prospect for contemporary artists, it was a badge of honor because those rental galleries that also curated exercised aesthetic judgment to select artists for their curated slots. Granted, support did not come in the form of representation, as Lieberman scolded. Still, by giving no-fee exhibitions to young and ambitious artists, rental galleries indeed help them gain exposure and critical attention, thereby furthering their careers. In a sense, these rental galleries effectively functioned as a non-profit alternative spaces like those in Euro-America that have supported contemporary artistic practices without formal representation. In the post-war history of rental galleries, two venues in Tokyo stand out. One is Takemiya Gallery, a space run by an art supply store. Takemiya curated its solo exhibition series based on recommendations from the revered art critic Takiguchi Shuzo, who expounded on the importance of solo exhibition for emerging artists. Altogether, 208 exhibitions were presented from 51 to 57 at Takemiya Gallery. The other is Naiqua Gallery, a short-lived space that existed from 63 to 67, known for its emphasis on experimentalism. From the beginning, it was intended to be a short-term venture. The owner, Miyata Kunio, was then a medical student whose father, an internist, had recently passed away. Miyata needed a few more years of training before opening his own practice at the office he inherited from his late father. Nakanishi Natsuyuki, his child friend and a member of the group Hired Center, advised him to open a rental gallery with the signage that advertised its specialty Naiqua, meaning internal medicine, intact, calling it Naiqua Gallery. The young Miyata was an ardent advocate of experimentation. The announcement for Naiqua's opening in 63 bears his gallery manifesto, which reads, "Rental gallery is a test tube, if you will, in which anything can be placed, which anybody can occupy and use at his will. It's a transparent and completely characterless space. Today, When the experimental spirit must be consciously emphasized, the rental gallery, akin to a test tube, will be immensely effective. If the need for an art movement in vivo is asserted, it does not follow that we need not experiment in vitro. In fact, to this goal, many test tubes, that is, many rental galleries, are needed. By the way, we can use a test tube as a single flower vase or even as a whiskey glass. As a test tube functions as such only within the laboratory and only in the hand of an experimentalist with a clear intention. I sincerely hope that Naiqua Gallery will function precisely like a true test tube. No doubt, Miyata's friendship with Nakanishi made him aware of the library vanguard scenes. Unburdened by the need to make profit beyond perhaps paying the rent, Miyata genuinely finds pleasure in witnessing the birth of new movements at his place and personally getting to know young artists of his generation. Naiqa's location was favorable, right in front of Shinbashi Station. This is the Shinbashi Station, and then this is the Yamanote line. And on the western edge of the Ginza Gallery, this is the Ginza Gallery area of the map in the art annual. A single room with walls 18 meters long, Naiqua hosted an impressive list of 125 exhibitions from May 63 to February 66, as researched and documented by Miyata Yuka. A number of them immediately or subsequently entered the annals of 60s art in Japan. In the gallery guide in the Art Annual, Naiqua never listed itself as also curating, but Naiqa's modest but curated program, in the true sense of the word, was key to its advocacy of experimentation. Miyata began the curated program auspiciously by inviting Nakahara Yusuke, one of the so-called Big Three critics, to guest organize Room of Alibi in July 63, in which he brilliantly interpreted the latest tendency of anti-art, Hangeijutsu, by assembling ready-made based works by 10 artists, including such veterans as Tanaka Shintaro, a Neo-Dada member, Ochi Osamu, a Kyushuha member, and 3 Highlight Center members, along with such new faces as Tateishi Koichi. However, the mainstay of the gallery's operation was the solo exhibition, attesting to his concept of a test tube in which anything can be placed. Naiqua presented a broad spectrum of tendencies from abstraction to pop, from conceptualism to installation art. Some luminaries of new art, such as Highlight Center, Shinohara Ushio, and Matsuzawa Yutaka, are known to have been invited to show their work without fees. Knowing Naiqa's critical reputation, some others chose to show at Naiqua by booking their slots and pay their daily fees of 4,000 yen. However, with no financial record left, it is not easy to ascertain which exhibition was indeed invitational or not. Given Miyata's connection to Nakanishi, it is not surprising to see more than 10 exhibitions of conceptualism, 15 to be precise, out of the total of 125 documented exhibitions. Nakanishi's collective, Highlight Center, had 2 exhibitions. One was their 6th mixer plan in May 63, held before the formal opening of the gallery. The other was their historic Great Panorama exhibition in 64. And then this is, you can see the map of Naiqua Gallery. This is the JR Kokutetsu Shinbashi station. These red dots of Highlight Center trademark exclamation mark This dot actually indicates the place location of Naiqua Gallery. To mount Great Panorama exhibition, Highlight Center closed the whole gallery on the exhibition's opening day. So they put the sign. This is how they close the door to the gallery. And then this is a sole witness of closed space. Cockroach kept in the grass jar, the grass. Thus, it is also called closing event. And you can see the exterior of the Naiqua Gallery. This is the billboard. And then you can see the signs of closing in the window. And the group opened the gallery on its last day with a closing party. You can see Jasper Jones opening the door. And here you can see Yoko Ono talking to somebody at the closing party when the gallery was open. On December 64, about half a year later, Matsuzawa Yutaka also closed Naiqua Gallery, although there is no documentary photo of it. An empty exhibition in which no work was shown dates back to 58, when Yves Klein staged the so-called Void at Iris Claire Gallery in Paris. However, so long as the actual closing of the gallery space is concerned, it was begun by Highlight Center and Matsuzawa Yutaka in 64, an important event in world art history. In the Western logic, the gallery is a site of commerce. Even with conceptualism, if one closes the gallery could not conduct its business. All the more so in order to critique the commodification of art, represented by the gallery system. Robert Barry in New York closed 3 galleries in 69 remotely, Amsterdam, Milan, and Los Angeles. In contrast, Naiqua is a container in which artists can put anything. That is, a total freedom zone. It then was utterly meaningless if an artist closed Naiqua for no good reason. In the case of Great Panorama exhibition, according to the account of Akasegawa Genpei, a Highlight Center member, just as his can of the universe inverted the relationship of inside and outside of the can and contained the whole universe outside the can, Great Panorama exhibition foregrounded the whole world outside the gallery as the group exhibits. Matsuzawa's case is far more complicated, so I suggest you read my book. I explained in full, Radicalism in the Wilderness. Topped with these 2 gallery closings, Naiqua is a treasure trove of conceptualism. Thanks to his friendship with Miyata, Nakanishi made it possible for his conceptualist friends of Highlight Center and Tokyo Fluxus to have solo exhibition at Naiqua. Yoko Ono was a returnee from New York and a vital liaison to Fluxus and such vanguard composers as John Cage. She staged 7 one-day events at Naiqua. Izumi Tatsu joined Highlight Center after the group was formed. Thus, his name is not part of the collective's name. Hai from Takamatsu Jiro, Red from Akasegawa Genpei, and Center from Nakanishi Natsuyuki. In Izumi's first contribution to Naiqua in July 63, he in effect officiated the former medical office as a gallery space. Conscious of this fact, he used the gallery space itself as the subject of his exhibition events by placing captions on various fixtures in the room, like ventilation fan was accompanied by caption saying number 6, fan, in English, FAN. Miyata himself later commented, "It appears the gallery itself was a work, and I was part of the work." Izumi even organized the closing event of the exhibition, anticipating Highlight Center's closing party for Great Panorama exhibition the following year. In December 1963, Kubota Shigeko had her solo exhibition at Naiqua, and soon after she left Japan to join Fluxus in New York upon Nam Junpei's advice. Kubota's exhibition, titled First Love, Second Love, ... may be best understood as a two-part conceptual installation work. An elaborate invitation she mailed out functions as an instruction for the gallery installation. A translucent sheet of paper overlaid on the invitation ticket bears a typewritten text that reads, "Make a floor with waste paper which are all love letters to you. Spread a sheet of white cloth on the floor. Skin your lips by yourself. Kiss a man who has mustache in the audience." She also prepared a handwritten CV, a photo of herself making a metal sculpture in her yard, and 3 photographs, each showing a part of a metal sculpture laid on white paper or cloth marked as first love, second love, and third love. These items were likely prepared for publicity purposes, as this particular set was found in a green envelope addressed to Miki Tamon, a then curator of the National Museum of Modern Art, Tokyo. In her later account, Kubota explained how she made her installation at Naiqua. She spread her old love letters over the floor, on which she made a mountain of used newspapers purchased from a landmine, covered it with a white sheet, and placed an iron sculpture on top. The viewer was supposed to climb the mountain to see the sculpture on top. In other words, she orchestrated a space to experience a sculpture. Tone Yasunao was a member of Group Ongaku and friendly with Akasegawa. Tone taught Akasegawa how to compose a music by way of creating an event. Tone's solo exhibition in October 1964 was Tone Prize exhibition, intended to critique the jury system of salons and competitive exhibitions. Contrary to the traditional jury selections, Tone gave away the namesake Tone Prize to all participants. While the invited jurors, such as Ichiyanagi Toshi or Yoko Ono or Kazekura Sho, Takiguchi Shuzo, all these his friends, and then in the avant-garde circle, those jurors determined awardees based on their own criteria. Interestingly, Yoko Ono's prize was solely intended to a male artist, engendering a reverse sexism in spirit. On the first day of Tone Prize exhibition, Naiqua Gallery was filled with entries to the competition. You can see everybody is helping the installation. Among the entries was Highlight Center, who presented cleaning event, officially known as Be Clean, or campaign to promote cleanliness and order in the metropolitan area. The event involved cleaning the street of the busy shopping district of Ginza, animated by the Tokyo Olympic Games. Their irreverent cleaning, in which they employed such out-of-place tools as toothbrushes and a cleaning rag, successfully won a Tone Prize. In this photograph by Hirata Minoru, we can see their signboard and armband, you can see in this photo, were placed on the or near the wall with the ribbon. It's very difficult to see. Their ribbon is here. This work got the ribbon on the immediately on the object. It may not be an overstatement. As small as it may be, Naiqua Gallery was one of major platforms from which new art emerged in 60s Japan, along with the internationally famed Occidental Center, which was backed by the large cultural capital of the flower arrangement school that promoted the intermedia ranging from experimental music to experimental film, avant-garde art to animation. Small as it might have been, Naiqua enlivened the vanguard scenes as provocatively as Sogetsu Art Center. However, conceptualism was not the sole beneficiary of Naiqua Gallery. By far, no other artist of 60s Japan benefited from the existence of Naiqua than Shinohara Ushio. And then you can see Shinohara here standing on the right. Shinohara's significance in 60s art in Japan can be understood by the fact that he was among 2 Japanese finalists of the Nagaoka Contemporary 65 Prize exhibition, along with Takamatsu Jiro. In this slide, Shinohara's very pop canvases can be seen next to Hinman's minimalist canvas. Complete opposite of the cerebral Takamatsu, an action-oriented Shinohara published a semi-autobiography, Avant-Garde Road, in 68. His words of lived experiences intimate how local Japan was. In the early 60s, when Shinohara was immersed in action art, his thinking went as follows. The spiritual freedom that arises from the rewardless act, musho no koi, of art, with a capital A, geijutsu, is nothing but a thing of the past. In front of an interviewer's microphone, a serious discussion of art is useless. He who loudly says something shocking wins. In front of a camera, he must not hesitate but start dancing naked. This idea propelled his signature practice of boxing painting and other action-based works from 1959 onward, though he was not so often naked. Although his action art left no physical trace, it was memorialized with photographs by such photographers as William Klein, you can see on the slide, Hirata Minoru, and Hanaga Mitsutoshi, who gave him exposure outside the art world and afforded the second life to Shinohara's ephemeral action. In the paper, in the slide, you can probably see the texture of the white background. That's a Kent paper. He pasted on the concrete wall fence on which he boxed. So basically, you cannot preserve it. So in that sense, it didn't leave any trace, physical trace, I mean. Although his action art left no physical trace, it was memorialized, generally speaking. In 60s Japan, avant-garde artists has practically no expectation of sales of their works. That is, little expectation to gain financial reward from their works. In this context, Shinohara proposed a paradigmatic shift in artist reward, intently quoting publicity as his reward in the otherwise rewardless life. Moving on to 63 or 4, when Shinohara shifted from action art to pop art, he made another proclamation in Avant-Garde Road, swinging to the opposite extreme. Inspired by the commercially successful pop art in New York, he decided to bring the age of galleries to Japan in the mid-60s. He wrote in Avant-Garde Road as follows, entering an age of galleries. However, we will throw in our avant-garde works that is a monster into a 2DK apartment equipped with a kotatsu heater. In return, we decided to receive plenty of dough. What kind of gallery did Shinohara talk about, or Shinohara had in his mind? Apparently, commercial galleries that will bring money to artists, I think. Indeed, by the mid-60s, Tokyo began to see a small sign of the market for contemporary art with a handful of commercial galleries, such as Tokyo Gallery, Minami Gallery, Nantenshi, and Aoki Gallery, specializing in contemporary art. However, the reality of Japan vastly different from that of New York, and if we examine his chronology, another reality emerges, his heavy reliance on rental galleries. In fact, no other artist took more advantage of the rental gallery system than Shinohara. Between 63 and 65, the crucial period when he developed not one but two pop-inflected series, he had 10 solo exhibitions over this 3-year period, a stunning frequency in and of itself, and all were held at rental galleries. And then I didn't include his prolific activities of the organizing group exhibition that also were held at rental galleries. Notably here, 8 of them were held at one venue, Naiqua Gallery. Shinohara recalled how Miyata would give him an urgent call at the last minute whenever he had a hole in his calendar. Not many artists could get ready for solo exhibition at a moment's notice, let alone at this frequency. So Shinohara was a very convenient artist to fill the calendar when he has a hole. In retrospect, the successive opportunities for intensive production were best support Shinohara received from Miyata, igniting a fire of creativity in the artist. Naiqua enabled him to make a swift transition from his action phase and fully develop his pop styles. It first manifested in the series of imitation art beginning in 63, followed by another series, Oiran, started in the next year. Especially important was the ongoing exploration of the Oiran series. The artist is the first to admit his indebtedness to Naiqua, as he recalls. Before that, I had small shows at Naiqua Gallery. These tiny shows helped me grow. And what is this that? And that means his first commercial gallery exhibition held in 66 at Tokyo Gallery. Under the title of Do Festival, he made a splash with a number of large Oiran canvases. The most spectacular was Do Festival, consisting of 3 panels and as wide as 4 meters. Ironically, in 60s Japan, a gallery representation did not come free of charge either. And Lieberman would be surprised to know. Yamamoto Takashi, the owner of Tokyo Gallery, tried to help him get some sales by producing silkscreen prints from Do festivals and a few other pop works, but nothing was sold from the exhibition itself. Thus, according to the gallery, he incurred a huge debt of 330,000 yen from transportation, filming, and opening expenses, which was more than $900 at the exchange rate at the time, or about 10 weeks worth of rental gallery space. Tokyo Gallery took the largest painting, Do Festival, in lieu of payment. The work was eventually sold to Yamamura Tokutaro, a collector known for his Gutai collection and other contemporary art. And it was subsequently acquired by the Hyogo Prefecture Museum of Art as part of the Yamamura collection. No greater support a gallery can give to an artist than to place its work in an institutional collection. Tokyo Gallery went on to show Shinohara's works in group exhibitions and continued to support him. Yet, in the late 60s, Shinohara saw no prospect for his career in Tokyo and moved to New York in 69 on a JDR third fund grant. In New York, his creativity and productivity continued to flourish to invent new works, the series of motorcycle sculpture and an expansive body of vividly narrative-based paintings and drawings. As he gained critical attention in his new home, he was given a solo exhibition at Japan House Gallery, presently Japan Society Gallery in '82, and Alexandra Monroe, this was her first curatorial project. She was engaged as an assistant to Rand Castile, the gallery director. In Tokyo, he established a lasting relationship with Gallery Yamaguchi in '81. Until the untimely death of the owner Yamaguchi Mitsuko in 2010, he continued to show with her. Notably, Gallery Yamaguchi was a new breed of also curating rental galleries, in that it actively represented artists, primarily selling their works to public museums, whose number significantly increased since 1970. The foregoing is one key element of the evolutionary path that modernism in Japan took, situated in the locally specific conditions. Notably, the practice of artists and the concerns of institutions too evolved over years. It also makes a cautionary tale for the study of multiple modernisms. Few practices are exactly what they look like or sound like, inextricably situated between the local and the global. All the more so, it is important to construct world art history from bottom up, to narrate not the universal story necessarily, but the globally resonating story. Thank you very much.
Hi, should I just come in?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Tomii, Reiko, for another stimulating talk, really. And well, first and foremost, my honest congratulations, Reiko-san. And then I was particularly honored to be part of this celebratory event. And then thank PoNJA, the Burke Center, Midori Oka, and Professor McKelway and Dr. Tezuka for inviting me. Rather than reiterating what you've just eliminated, Dr. Tomii, I want to pose some questions or ask some additional comments. And I also want to stress that Reiko's contribution to the field, which many of you strongly agree, but one example is the exhibition that Dr. Tezuka mentioned in the beginning, the exhibition at the Getty Research Center. And Dr. Tomii said, corrected that you just contributed a catalog essay, but your contribution was more than that. And then I'm going to assure that on the later part of my time. But let me start with the first question about the exploration of rental gallery, and especially Naiqua is indeed an inevitable one to truly grasp unconventional art emerging in 1960s Japan. And if if you are not aware of such locally unique situations or micro histories that you mentioned, we or anyone, right, including us, could step on landmines, misinterpret what could be key phenomena or nuanced readings of artworks, if not kill ourselves. And you briefly mentioned that there are multiple landmines, right? The rental gallery being one of them. What are some of other landmines that you think imperative besides rental gallery? And then how about, for example, annual exhibitions organized by the Yomiuri or Mainichi, the newspaper company that you briefly touched on your talk today?
So maybe I answer to your question now, or how do we do that? Yeah, the landmine is not the few I said. For example, I kind of casually mentioned like artist organizations, Bijutsu Dantai, and that flourished since the early 20th century in Japan. It's a kind of a collective artist organization that functioned as an exhibition society. That is a kind of a landmine because just like rental gallery, which still exists in Japan, artist organization exists in Japan. Moreover, often the time, not all the rental galleries, survive over like 30, 40 years. Amazing thing about the Bijutsu Dantai in Japan is what was established, say, in 1914, Nika, second section society, which is the first anti-salon yoga organization. It is still with us. If you go to National Art Center in Tokyo, you can see the annual show. So when, especially for Japanese people, when they think about Bijutsu Dantai, they don't necessarily think about the role played by, say, Nika in 1930s or 40s, but they see what they are now. It's very difficult to close the gap between what they are now and then what they were, because this is a long discussion. I love to talk, and then I can just have another hour just talking, and then that's not probably enough. So I stop here. So that's for Japanese people, it's a landmine. Also, the exhibition Rika curated at Getty, title is Art, Anti-Art, No Art. That's a major landmine, actually. In part because the idea of art, or in the Western sense, was first imported in late 19th century from the West to Japan, and then the corresponding Japanese geijutsu and bijutsu were coined, and then geijutsu and bijutsu had its own life since then. And then by the time by the 1960s, it became completely Japanese. Of course, it has a corresponding Western entity, to parallel, but the geijutsu and bijutsu has a very particular way they were used, and then hangeijutsu, no art, and then higeijutsu. Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say? Art is geijutsu, and anti-art is hangeijutsu, and non-art is higeijutsu. If you look up Webster or Oxford, they are all generic noun. However, if we talk about 60s Japan, no-art is a tendency, a movement. Anti-art is no-art and movement. You cannot treat this no-art and anti-art like a generic noun listed in Oxford or Merriam-Webster. You have to, this is my experience, I have to always insist to editors that, this is a movement, it's not noun. And then so we have to uppercase it, and then we have to put Japanese after it, even though, it also has generic meaning too. So that's another landmine. And then you mentioned newspaper company, how they become a cultural driving force after the war. And then that came from our wartime experience, that the newspaper companies organized and promoted war by showing war record painting and so on and so forth. And then they just switched the direction in post-war Japan in a more democratic way, and then so on and so forth. And then sometimes we say Japanese museum works this way, working with the newspaper company and so on and so forth. So that's another landmine, the way curatorial practices organized also reflect the reality, but also it's not a self-contained space. So the Japanese curators are conscious of the how globally curatorial practices are, performed, and then there are always intersection of the local situation and then kind of a global or international understanding. So it could be a landmine, but also landmine can be always removed. That's why I like the word landmine, because the two other words I thought about using to talk about this issue. One was stumbling block. This comes from New Testament, and then it's about faith, Christian faith, and then stumbling block keeps you from true faith in Jesus Christ. And this is a single universe. So within single system of belief, they set up they talk about stumbling block. So we have a multilateral, multi-value system in global, especially when we look at the multiple modernism. So the stumbling block as a common English is okay, but to me it was not okay. Pitfall is another word. You fell in pitfall, and then it's kind of somebody is making it. That's a bad. I'm sorry, that's a bad metaphor. The pitfall is like it's, I don't know, pitfall didn't feel like right, because the if you see the in order to, you have to pull up somebody. That sounded the very bad metaphor to me. The visual image was very bad in terms of history. Landmine is interesting because it's set by one party to defeat another party, but over time, leftover mines could kill the descendant of one party too. And then if you know you step on it, there is a very delicate way to disarm it too. So if you know you step on it, you might not lose your legs or life. So I thought landmine is more fun to think about.
Definitely warning, and it also like when you talk about the multiplicity and the intentionality of the party of putting the landmine or burying a landmine, it's definitely workable in the case of in the examples that you discussed today. But it also like I want to thank that you mentioned that locally specific or Japan specific historical context, right? Through you're touching on art organization that you mentioned, art and business dantai, and also Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum as a kind of predecessor of Lento the gallery. But I wonder like if we can learn a little more about the condition itself in which Lento gallery emerged in the 1950s. I believe that's what you mentioned. Is that something to do with the dissemination of Western style museums in Tokyo and other urban or suburban areas? And also, I wonder, the Naiqua had a joint exhibition, but were there collaborations among Lento galleries or a network of Lento galleries, or even between Lento and commercial galleries, within Tokyo and beyond?
Yeah, the 50s, the interesting thing, I mentioned the artist organization before, and then the salon style annual exhibitions as an important event of the art world. That was how a young artist became known, entering those salons, and then recognized, like how many times you recognize, you may be able to become a member, and then you kind of climb up the rank within the group. That was the one way to become an artist. That's the Dantai system. the Dantai system worked well in pre-war Japan, but that's also created the consternation of aesthetic expressive development, because it's a small universe. The top echelon of the Dantai judges newcomers as well as the whole organization. So it creates a kind of a self-copying style. There is very little development. They tend to stay as they are. There's there's a good benefit for that in pre-war Japan, but in the post-war Japan, definitely that looked down upon as a feudalism and then a bad system, and then so the not anti-creative. So the young artists like the Takiguchi Shuzo, who promoted the idea of solo exhibition for younger artists, the idea of having solo exhibition, younger artists as well as other artists having solo exhibition, then you need a space. So this is a kind of supply and demand relationship. And then of course the Western style museums like Tokyo National Museum, the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo created, and also in Kyoto, and then so on and so forth. Nagaoka Museum of Contemporary Art is another important Western influence. But those are not necessarily where younger artists can show immediately. Occasionally they were included in the survey of new artists or new talent or something like that, but that's not the place they could. So the rental gallery was the in a way freedom zone. They can create and then present the art. You asked the networks of galleries. Yeah, it seems some galleries work together, because you can see like a Naiqua. People in Japan always, tell me you shouldn't say this so much, so emphasize it. And, but the Japanese galleries look very small. Compared to, I'm used to kind of looking at Chelsea or Soho as a big gallery space. So Tokyo's gallery spaces look particularly small. So sometimes, in order to organize an ambitious curatorial project, a few gallery, like a Muramatsu Gallery, which is a rental gallery, and Tokyo Gallery, which is a commercial gallery, they work together to mount Tricks and Vision in 1967, I think, asking Ishiko Junzo and Nakahara Yusuke to co-curate the show. It's a very important exhibition, but they use two venues for that. And then some other galleries work together, and then so on and so forth. But more or less, it's unless without such special project situation, rental gallery, it seems rental gallery operates on its own, because the big shows, big project like that really requires manpower, more than, and then the business model of rental gallery is basically you are owner, right? And then you have a back room with the telephone and desk, and then artists are supposed to do everything, install the show, create the postcard or announcement, so it's a do-it-yourself gallery space. So it's actually easy to operate by one person, and then that's more difficult to do a big project like Tricks and Vision.
Sure.
I think.
Thank you. And in relation to what you just mentioned, the small size, the small limited space of rental gallery, and it also the do-it-yourself mode. So there seems to be, if I may, there are, let's say, like two primary impacts of rental gallery, especially in Naiqua, the case you talked about today. So one is an impact over a mode of practice or production, and the other is over a mode of thinking. And then concerning the former, a mode of practice or production, I particularly think of the ways artists prepare themselves and produce artworks for, in opposed to the annual Yomiuri Independent, which had been the hub of experimental art in post-war Japan. And for Yomiuri, an independent, the artists had almost a year, right? And then in some cases, over a year to mull over what they could do for the exhibition. And then also the size, the exhibition space, the size is much larger, could be much larger than the rental space. But the Yomiuri Independent was suddenly canceled in 1964, as you mentioned today. Then artists were compelled to produce artworks for much smaller scale and for much shorter span of time, whether for a commercial gallery or rental gallery. And this apparently worked for Shinohara quite well, but what about the other artists? A shorter production span and then the limitation of the space have affected them too, which could also perhaps accelerate a shift from object-based practice to concept-based art making. I wonder.
What we didn't talk about today, and then also it's less discussed, is the what is usually called concours. It's a French word for competitive exhibition, like shell prize exhibition. Mainichi contemporary art exhibition has the competitive section and so on and so forth. So even though Yomiuri Independent was out, the large scale competitions still actually are, at least 3 or 4 of them, the artists as opportunities. So they could shoot for sending their works to this venue. And then, of course, it's much more regulated than Yomiuri Independent, but you can see you saw the Shinohara's painting, the large one. He also made large canvases for the Nagaoka's competition too. So there are many more opportunities for artists to work in a larger scale. Not the Yomiuri was more famous in the history, especially the way we understand the history. But by that time, by 63, there are other opportunities for artists to show. And especially in the late 60s, the young artists, even still at the graduate school or undergraduate, they were aware, say, Mainichi's competition, Mainichi Contemporary's competitive section is entrance to art world. So they shoot for sending the work. The good example was actually Monoha, especially Sekine Nobuo. His early career from 68 to 70, basically you can study what kind of competitive situation young artists can have, because every major work he produced was tied to competitive exhibition. He actually, in 68, Sekine was part of the Nagaoka Contemporaries Award Prize exhibition. And then he is known to make a gatspoz on the stage when he was announced the grand prize winner. So it's a little unfortunate that the Yomiuri Independent became a little too famous in art history, especially outside Japan. there are many other opportunities they had.
Sure. And I think like Dr. Tezuka is appearing on screen, that may be a sign of us to move forward, right? So I think the last comment that I would want to make is, reflecting on like what Dr. Tomii just mentioned too, but also in the talk as well. Like I feel that the Naiqua also had the modern space, or like having a support for artists, but also this rhetoric of internal medicine. So this the vision of like a moving inner world inside, and the psychology that also speaks to the rise of conceptualism in Japan as well. And then that could be compared to Soget's art center, the much more flamboyant space that could invite artists from outside, and then we could call that it's more surgical, like external eyes, hands, and practice. So both Naiqua and the Sogetsu, we needed two wheels, or like a surgical practice and internal medicine practice to have our healthy body, a good new art that was emerging in the 60s in Japan. But Dr. Tezuka, Miyako, do we have a time for questions from
We are 2 minutes past 7:30. So Matthew, what would you like to?
I think we have time for a few questions from the audience, maybe two or three.
Sure.
Apparently the Q&A function is not working. Maybe we can have the questions through the chat function, if you can see the chat function on your Zoom window. I'm sure we've got some probably very, very eager questions and responses to this wonderful lecture that we've had. So please, if you'd like to submit questions, please do so through the chat function.
Or maybe while we wait for any remaining questions from the audience, I would like to make one, not so much a question, but a comment or observation. I thought that the gallery, the Ginza as a gallery neighborhood is a really interesting development. And it certainly continues onward to even 1990s, when artists such as Ozawa Tsuyoshi and Suda Yoshihiro kind of use the system of gallery itself within their artistic practice by posing kind of gallery system criticism in a way, with the whimsy of their own. So I wonder what there is in that neighborhood. It's a really interesting history.
Yeah, that similar question was raised at the University of Tokyo lecture. And then I asked a few people what's going on, why Ginza, why it's like, we know like a Soho or, Upper West East Side, and then Chelsea, and then in New York. But why Ginza? And one of two things, the Ginza is a shopping district, and then there are many buildings newly made. Like if somebody has the store space, from Edo period or from Meiji period, the old style store space, they want to turn it into a building because it's more cost efficient, I think. And then the first floor may be a store or, those things. And then they have a space above. And then in one opinion or in one explanation is that the wives of these store owners or building owners are very cultured people, and then they wanted to have art in their building. So the rental gallery was one easy way for these owners or art lovers to create a space. That's one explanation. And another explanation is the cachet that the Ginza has. Ginza, like they have Matsuya Hyakkaten, department store, Shanghai, It's a great, either way, it's a great shopping street. And then that allure was like, I think, Madison Avenue in New York have a kind of additional, added value to cultural scene. That's Ginza as a magnet that's given by the actually the current owner directors of Tokyo Gallery. They said if you buy something at the Matsuya department in Ginza, and then you bring that to outside Tokyo, that's always appreciated from Ginza. So
I may just follow up. So while we're still waiting, I hope we may have at least one question from the audience, but perhaps while we're waiting, to touch on an aspect of Reiko's work that may not be so widely recognized amongst the modern and contemporary members or specialists in the larger field of Japanese art, and that is her deep commitment and engagement with Japanese art of earlier periods. And one thing that's always struck me about the constellations of kashi garō in Ginza is their proximity in many cases to gallery or galleries of kobijutsu, of antique dealers.
Yeah.
Of course, Nihonbashi being one of the real epicenters in Japan for the buying and selling of older art. So, having just made that observation, I wonder if there's any kind of connection that you see, Reiko, between that the presence of that kind of business and the rental galleries, perhaps at their origins. When these started, were some of them selling both older art and new art as well at the same time?
I think that model. See, the rental gallery, as Lieberman said, sells space, not wares. So not so much, I think. There are so many rental galleries, so I don't know the history of all of them. But I think that the connection with the kobijutsu traditional art is more apt for commercial galleries, because in the history of the yoga galleries and Nihonga galleries, they were extension of came out of the tradition of kobijutsu gallerist. And then Tokyo Gallery was a promoter of contemporary art, that unique presence, but also they dealt in the secondary market of modern yoga. So there is certain distinction between pure modernism and then post-war contemporary art. And then so Tokyo Gallery, they didn't really show the pure paintings in their galleries, but they did work in that. And then it's much same way actually as some contemporary art galleries in the West also dealt in modern paintings or sometimes older paintings. So the modern art, modernism or contemporary art is not separate from the entire art history, even though the expression-wise we always think of the transcending the previous mode. But in reality, especially if we think about not expression part, but the operation part, there is always a connection, I think, because that's the yeah. So yeah.
Well, there are two questions from the audience.
Yeah.
So if we can cover just those two. One is from Midori Yoshimoto, who is one of our key founding members of PoNJA. So her question is, after your research on regional art movements, what motivated you to do an in-depth research on alternative galleries mainly located in cities? Do you intend to expand research on regional art galleries possibly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really have to confess, the rental gallery is a topic I identified, that's the right word. I identified when I wrote an essay for Art and No Art. There's one line which says rental galleries like, Western alternative space. And then I was hoping somebody else will study that. And then nobody did. So it became my homework, shukudai. So a few years ago, I said I should actually, clear up all the shukudai I have. So that's a part of the reason I wanted Rika to come today as a discussant, because she is actually partly responsible for me working on it. And the interesting thing is rental gallery is primarily a large city phenomenon. Of course, there were rental galleries in regional cities like Niigata and such, but the attention they want, if your purpose is to get critical attention, Tokyo or maybe Osaka and Kyoto, perhaps, is the place to be. So it's not so contradictory that I look at those galleries, because, for example, GAN, Niigata Collective, they did 7 or 8 group exhibition in Niigata and in Tokyo within a year. They could have done that because it's all rental galleries. If it's a commercial gallery, it's very impossible to have 7 or 8 group shows. Group shows, I say, it's a GAN's group show, so it's similar to solo exhibition for an artist. So that's why I decided to just focus on Tokyo, and then a few kind of paradigmatic examples that tells us how the rental gallery operated. We have, yeah.
Yes, I think Sol Lee posted 2 questions. First question was related to what you just said. So maybe I'll take her next second question, which is, what else is on your list of homework?
Framework.
Homework.
Is she asking homework? Okay.
What else major list of homework? What else is left for you to?
Homework. Yes. Bikyoto. That's a homework, because I first touched on it in 1799 for global conceptualism, and then it's a very difficult collective because they were enmeshed with the student movement, and then their rhetoric and logic highly, it's very complicated. And then also, in order to understand them, now I have a much more clearer view of what they were trying to do. I first had to understand how 60s art, in an expanded sense from Gutai to anti-art to no-art, actually worked out the issues, like local issues, and then operational as well as expressive issues, because now I situate Kyoto as an end game of modernism. Like a wilderness is anti-institutional outside the institution, then Kyoto is institutional critique within, staying within institutional space, which is very different from the being in the wilderness. So finally I cleared the wilderness, so I think I can do the Kyoto now.
Well, I think we're just about out of time here, unfortunately. There was another question from Nina Horisaki Christians. Nina, I think we're just going to have you take this up with Tomii Sensei and the other panelists directly online through email. I'm afraid that we're going to have our webinar turned off, so I really need to wrap things up. But Reiko-san, thank you so very much for your incredibly informative lecture. Rika-san, Hiro-sensei, thank you very much for your insightful comments and discussion. And Miyako, it was great to co-sponsor this event with you, and I hope that we'll do more.
Thank you. Looking forward to the opportunity.
So with that, thank you all very much. We hope that you will stay well, and we will look forward to seeing you at other Burke Center events here at Columbia, and they'll be announced through the Japan Art History Forum, and when they're related to modern and contemporary art, through PoNJA-GenKon's listserv as well. So again, Tomii Sensei, omedetou gozaimasu.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.